Just before the break, I just threw this question out there. How many retail stores closed in the UK last year? How many retail stores closed in the UK last year? I mean, some of those will be the same company, but actual physical stores that closed down just last year. The answer, 17,145. 17,145, which just gives you a kind of... I know there's other businesses that open, and that's great. And I know not everybody needs a store today like they used to back in the day. I guess there's some of that in there as well. But even so, it's rather disturbing when you hear that thousands of shops have closed across Britain over the last 5 years as vacancies rates reach critical levels, according to industry data. In the second quarter of this year, the overall vacancy rate increased to 13.9% after rising 0.1 percentage point. This is according to the British Retail Consortium Vacancy Monitor. The number of outlets laying vacant in shop centres was worse at 17.8%. The data does not take account of any store closure arising from Wilko going into administration. So that number will be significantly higher, assuming that particular company isn't saved. And it's not looking good. How do we save the high street? Alex Schlagman is founding partner of Savethehighstreet.org. Afternoon to you, Alex.
Afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I know there's a little bit of, the world changes and people do online stuff, and there's some of that, but that doesn't explain away all of these closures, right? I mean, there are genuine issues here, I'm sure, for a whole number of reasons, but the figures are going in the wrong direction.
We're in the most transformational period in the entire history of high streets. There's absolutely no doubt about that. COVID has accelerated things, and what you touched on before is that we need to change. To save the high street, we need to change the high street, and we've got a high vacancy rate at the moment, and we need to really lean into that as an opportunity to repopulate high streets with the right businesses in the right places doing the right things. These vacant units, whether they're small or big, are an opportunity for positive change. Empty department stores can be reimagined into exciting mixed-use destinations that become the anchors of high streets again. And small shops that lie empty could be turned into incubators that give small businesses a chance to set up and succeed on high streets. So we need to embrace the change and say we are in a period of structural change happening generally in this market, and we need to transition as quickly as possible to something that works for the future.
When we spoken to different business owners over the years, one of the issues that they cite, this will be no new news to you, Alex, is they've got a good business plan. It would be quite nice to have a small shop or an outlet of some kind, even if it is a sort of collective market within a bigger... One of the problems is the cost of business rates. It's business rates, it's local taxation, it's all of that that makes it, for many people, just simply unachievable.
Yeah, so I mean, we have to look at the total cost, but in terms of business rates, small businesses can get discretionary rate relief in some areas, and we need to see whether that can be applied more broadly across the market. Additionally, if we're really looking to focus on this next generation of businesses coming into high streets, we need to reduce the friction to make it possible for them to do so. And that means business rate holidays during the early days when you're first setting up, to make sure you can test out that opportunity of being in physical space and see whether it can work, but also new structures between landlord and tenant. So we've seen over the years a lot of risk sharing start to emerge in the market, performance-based leases, so you pay rent based on how well you are doing. And those kind of partnerships are going to be critical, as well as really looking at the long-term solution to business rates. Yeah, and I was saying a second ago, the trouble is when high streets or town centres start to board up shops, it creates, there's a bit of a knock-on effect there, isn't there? Because as a shopper in your neck of the woods, you look at something. I looked at a couple of areas recently, and there was a lot of that. Places that are closed down, the boards were up, the padlocks were there, the weeds and the moss had began to grow, broken windows were clearly visible, and you think, well, I don't want to go there anymore because it doesn't look nice. And even though there's still one or two businesses still open, they will no doubt suffer because of the optics of the location that they're currently in. So the success or failure of high streets impacts everybody. You know, we're in a situation where we live nearby places where we shop and we play.
Yeah.
And if you haven't got a high street that's vibrant, diverse, and something to be proud of, is that an area you now want to live in?
Yep.
So if we start to think about, you know, the implications of making high streets work, we start to realize that it's much bigger than just the collection of the individual businesses that trade within them. It affects a lot of societal and local economic factors that impacts everybody, whether or not they realize it.
And in terms of what kind of businesses, that's something that has changed. I mean, there's only so many coffee bars and mobile phone shops you can have, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we do at Savethehighstreet.org is we look at every single area. What's the right mix of offerings today? And that needs to evolve quickly over time. So we need to build flexibility into the system to allow people to come, try an offering out. If it doesn't work in a particular area, move. Yeah. We're in an age of the internet where things happen quickly. And we've been living in this world of businesses expected to come onto 5-year, 10-year leases for the long term, and they're no longer fit for purpose in that area. It doesn't mean that that business won't work in a different area. What we're looking at now is, what does a business on the future high street need to look like? And there's a number of general things, from being more experience-led and locally focused, but also every single high street needs to have a plan that reflects the needs of that local community today and the ability to change over time.
Absolutely right. Listen, Alex, thank you for your time. It's food for thought, all of this, and I'm sure we will speak again. Alex Schlagman, who is the founding partner of Savethehighstreet.org. If you look at some, I mentioned the coffee bars and the mobile phone shops. There's obviously a lot of that, and I do sometimes question when local high streets or shopping areas have a unit that's up for grabs. Is there nothing that does the local authority not have a plan? There's a big focus at the moment of Oxford Street down in London. Most people will be familiar with Oxford Street. Even if you're not from London, you'll be aware of, what Oxford Street is and all that goes with it. It's a very famous road. It links sort of Tottenham Court Road one end, and you've got Marble Arch the other end, and the street, and Selfridges is famously down there as well. There used to be a Debenhams, there's a big John Lewis, and then there's like the Gaps and Next and those kind of stores. But what there has been is a proliferation of sweet shops, those American candy stores, that sell stuff that's got more, the kind of sugar in it that could down a herd of buffalo, those kind of places. And there's a lot of coffee stuff. It's just not, I've never been enamoured by Oxford Street. I used to work in Oxford Street. The original talk radio was in Oxford Street. And there's nothing about it that's particularly attractive. And I don't know why, other than the fact that it's on the Monopoly board. When tourists come to London, a lot of them go, I want to go to Oxford Street. I don't know what you'd get out of it. What would you get walking around Oxford Street as a tourist? I don't know what's there, really. There's not even any theatres in Oxford Street itself. There's one at the very end, and there's many that come off Oxford Street. I think there's only one pub, isn't there? Is that the one opposite Tottenham Court Road Tube? The Tattenham Tap, that one, yes. There's just one pub. If you come off Oxford Street, there's loads of back street pubs that kind of down there. And it used to be great, because I think the cab drivers used to call it the Dirty Dozen, the roads that come off. There was kind of Dean Street and Frith Street and Greek Street and Argyle Street, Soho Street, all of these roads that you could come off Oxford Street and drive down, essentially, to Shaftesbury Avenue. And within that little nest is sort of Soho, basically. But there's loads of lovely little places in there. There's all sorts of nice little pubs and eateries. And I know it's changed a lot over the years. That becomes a bit more interesting. And there's a bit of artisan, some nice little bakeries and a little Italian deli and all that kind of stuff. It's a bit posh in some respects. But there's also a state school down there as well, on one of the roads that comes. I couldn't believe that for one afternoon when I was walking through Soho. Load of kids coming out of a school. Imagine going to school right in the middle of that. Would that be amazing, exciting, or terrifying? I'm not sure which. You've got strip clubs either side and a flipping primary school in the middle. Extraordinary. But nonetheless, the point is you need to make an area look vibrant. And that area, I think, once was, and it's not now. And part of the reason it isn't now is because the kind of choice of shops, Westminster Council, which run that stuff, I mean, how are they not earning a fat packet, all these? Well, what on earth are business rates like if you've got a store in Oxford Street? It must be absolutely vast. So with that in mind, you might say that when the planning permission comes in and says, I'd like to open another, Haribo shop or something, the council would go, no, we've got loads of those. In fact, we don't need any of those. Clear off with your chewy, sugary snacks. No, we want some nice shops. But maybe they're faced with no choice. I don't know. But permission to be there seems to be dependent on how big your chequebook is, not what your business plan might be. And there's no sign of them reducing rates because they want the maximum, and that's the way it is. 0344 499 1000. Or the 100 Club, famous music club, is in Oxford Street.